Kaido is not yet defeated and will likely be getting back up in the next few chapters. Regardless of whether you believe in the raid failing or not, most factors point to the battle itself not being over yet. And note that I said Kaido will be getting back up in the next few chapters and not next chapter 1050, because I think it is very possible that chapter 1050 will be a breather chapter where all of the heroes let out a sigh of relief, thinking it is over, before it starts up again, something Oda has often done throughout the story, the most notable example being chapter 572, the chapter after Ace was freed, where it was made to seem like everything was good, and Luffy and Ace were going to be able to get away. Or more recently, just last arc, Whole Cake Island, chapter 872, right after the Tamate Bako box had gone off, and the Straw Hats and Capone Beige and Germa had all successfully escaped the Tea Party and were basically acting as though the main problem had been solved, before things started back up again. I personally doubt Kaido would get back up in 1050, though it would be nice if it happened, but within the next 2 chapters, so by 1051, I do expect one of 2 things to happen. Either A, Kaido's flashback picks back up, leading to his eventual return, or B, he just straight up gets back up. If in 2 chapters' time neither of those 2 things has happened, then we can say that Kaido is defeated, the raid succeeded, the arc is over, and you can hold me to that. But it's not going to happen because Kaido isn't done, as I will be explaining today. So before we get into it, make sure to subscribe for more videos every week. So to begin with, I'm going to quickly list off a large number of plot threads that are currently unresolved or yet to even be addressed in Wano. None of this on its own is proof that there is definitely more to go in the story. It is purely a reminder that there are a lot of question marks still hanging. And I think it's important to recognize that there are still a lot of loose threads left, as that information is necessary to keep in mind when weighing whether or not this punch was the conclusion to everything. So first of all, what is the mystery behind Zoro's heritage, and why is it simultaneously being portrayed as important to the story, yet is about to be completely irrelevant if the story is over? What was the deal with Nidai Kitetsu, and why did it get so much focus if it was again completely irrelevant? Why was Wano built up as the land of gold, when that side of Wano has yet to be shown at all? What actually is Onigashima, and why was that implied to be important? Who is Yamato's mother? What were the Kakeshi dolls in the Shogun's palace? Who was the samurai that Crocus was drinking with? Why do these 3 numbers that Yamato has a close bond with clearly resemble the former daimyo of Wano that Yamato was in a cave with? Who is the man Tengu Yama was waiting for? What about Momonosuke's brand new character conflict as to whether or not he should open the borders of Wano? Was Toki in fact from the Void Century, and if so, why did that matter? Why are the different regions of Wano different climates? Why does Big Mom say this land has some secret related to One Piece? Now, some of you might say that maybe some of these plot threads will never be addressed. Maybe we never find out anything more about Toki. Maybe she just existed as this plot device to be able to send people to the future, and even though Oda clearly hinted at her past being important, maybe he just forgot to elaborate on it. Now, that doesn't sound like Oda to me, but sure, for maybe 1 or 2 of those threads, maybe it's something Oda forgot or had to cut. But it is highly unlikely that all of those things are just threads that Oda completely abandoned. And now, the second argument I see from people is that maybe all those threads will be picked up and resolved post-arc, and it's post-arc, post-climax, where all those question marks and mysteries will be answered. And to that I say, when has it ever been the case that Oda has saved dozens of plot threads and mysteries to be revealed and resolved post-arc? I think people may be confusing the fact that Oda goes hard on world building and revisiting grander big picture plot threads post-arc with the notion that post-arc is where we will get the resolution to all of these Wano-specific threads. Because here's the thing, when I was listing unresolved points, I didn't include bigger picture stuff like who is Zanisha. I actually kept that list shorter than I could have. I tried to keep it focused on Wano-specific plot threads and mysteries, because when it comes to arc-specific plot threads and mysteries, you can go back throughout any One Piece arc you like, Alabasta, Dressrosa, Thriller Bark, Skypiea, etc. And in not a single one of those arcs is there anywhere close to this number of arc-specific plot threads and mysteries to be resolved after the climax, like not even close. You might be surprised to realize this, but if you really go back and look, One Piece arcs are written very tightly. Over the course of the arc, a lot of mysteries and plot threads come up, but about 99% of those are revealed and resolved before the climax. Before Crocodile is defeated, we already know about Pluton and the poneglyphs and the dance powder and what Baroque has actually been doing. Before Enel is defeated, we already know the secret of Jaya and what happened to the City of Gold and the truth of Noland, all of that. By the time Doflamingo is defeated, we already know about his true identity, the truth about the toys, the truth about Kyros, the truth about Riku. Across the board, across all major One Piece arcs, Almost every mystery and plot thread of the island is resolved by the time the villain is to be defeated. And that's what makes the climax. It is the resolution. Everything has been revealed, just about everything has been brought to light. The truth of what is at stake, what is really going on in this land, what is being fought for, all of that is checked off, and then the villain is defeated. Now, we might get one, maybe two things answered or revealed at the end of the arc, small little hanging questions, or maybe a character thread here or there to get its conclusion, but that's it. By the time we get to post-villain defeat, the story pretty much always has a nice bow on it. But Wano is this one arc that is still filled with countless question marks and mysteries. Now, with that in mind, that there are still a lot of mysteries and unresolved plot threads in Wano, does Kaido's defeat here seem final? Is this typical at all of how villains are normally finished off? Because there are many things glaringly off about this finale. Many things you can point to right now that seem like Oda deliberately went out of his way to not write it as conclusively of a finish as he usually does. For starters, what has been the big ticking doomsday clock so far? Onigashima being moved to land on top of the flower capital, right? That's been the time bomb that must be defused for the last 50 chapters. So for a long time now, we've been seemingly building towards a particular finale of when Onigashima is finally hanging above the flower capital, when the hammer is about to come down on the people of Wano. And that is where, dramatically, you would expect things to conclude, with either the heroes valiantly stopping Doomsday at the 11th hour, or the bad guys succeeding, whatever. But either way, you expect it to get to the 11th hour. But instead we got to, 9 3/4? Like, not even really close enough to the flower capital for anyone there to even know anything bad was going on. And here I'll stop and say two things, which is first, you might respond, well, that's just the readers having the wrong expectations, which is a strange sentiment I've seen people floating in response to arguments that this finale was anticlimactic. Readers having wrong expectations is generally a terrible argument and a clear deflection from actual discussion. Because while yes, there are cases of readers having completely random expectations with zero narrative basis, for example, if you expect Don Krieg to one day fight Blackbeard and you're going to be extremely upset if that doesn't happen, then sure, that's a completely unfounded expectation. But a reader would be perfectly justified in expecting Luffy to one day face Blackbeard, because there is a tremendous amount of build-up and clearly identifiable narrative setup for this storyline. And a simple rule is that narrative setups are meant to have payoffs. That is storytelling. That is how storytelling works. If Blackbeard were to simply die next chapter by slipping on a banana peel, thus robbing us of any Luffy-Blackbeard confrontation, then f***ing obviously something went wrong there. It's not as the readers are at fault for expecting more out of Blackbeard, as the expectation of a Luffy-Blackbeard confrontation is something that is clearly set up in the narrative by the author. If there is a clearly established narrative setup, then the author has set an expectation. And along those lines, from the moment an author poses a particularly dramatic scenario, for example, Onigashima coming down on the flower capital, the author has planted the setup and yes, the expectation for that dramatic finale into the story. And if that for some reason upsets you, well, literally any narrative writing class you ever take will tell you the exact same thing, as that is in fact how drama works. And so the reality is, Oda established and continued to build up this idea of Onigashima coming above the flower capital and potentially falling on it over and over throughout the story, even drawing diagrams showing this impending final threat. And ultimately, it was resolved very quickly, seemingly in 3 small panels, without it ever even coming in view of the people in the flower capital. So nowhere close to the dramatic scenario that was built up to for a long time. This is a drastic departure from Oda's usual writing style, in that whereas this was a case where Oda built up to a dramatic scenario that never actually happened, normally what makes Oda's writing so exciting is that he'll build up to a dramatic scenario and then somehow even tops it with surprising twists that introduce even higher stakes and drama when the time comes. For example, in Alabasta, the ticking time bomb was of course the bomb itself, and after so much build up to this amazing chapter devoted to everyone putting everything they had on the line to just barely defuse the bomb in time, we got an even more dramatic revelation that the bomb would still go off regardless, and an even greater effort would be needed to deal with that. Similar example, Skypiea, the fear was that Enel would destroy Skypiea. There was so much frenzied evacuation and panic with everyone trying to get away with the build up to the Raigo, and then not only did Enel actually pull off the Raigo and Skypiea was shockingly actually destroyed, but then Enel doubled down on it and was about to destroy the Verth as well before he was stopped. I could go through a long list, but I think you all get the point. Oda is Oda because he doesn't fall short of readers' expectations, rather he consistently establishes some very exciting expectations for the reader and then surpasses them to the reader's pleasant surprise. If he has been building up to Onigashima reaching the Flower Capital and this final Doomsday scenario, then just saying, okay, you know what, it's over and wrapped up well before this becomes an actual problem, is basically the exact opposite of an Oda-style finale. Not to mention the manner in which the defeat occurred. Again, Oda always makes villain defeats as flashy and show-stopping as possible. Villain defeats in One Piece are absolute spectacles, unlike anything you see in any other series. Luffy doesn't just defeat Arlong. He tears down the entire symbolic structure of his power in the process. Luffy doesn't just defeat Crocodile, he punches him out into the middle of a gigantic civil war and brings the entire conflict to a halt. Luffy doesn't just defeat Enel, he turns the entire sky sunny and makes all of heaven and the blue sea hear the sound of this golden bell of freedom ringing as he takes down God, etc, etc. Any major Luffy victory is this powerful, climactic, resonant event that ripples through everything else that is going on, so that everyone stops and bears witness to what he has just done. Even in the chaos of Enies lobby, everything stops for a moment in the midst of a Buster call as the tower collapses and the Marines announce that Luffy has just defeated the unbeatable Rob Lucci. This victory against Kaido would be by far the quietest and least resonant victory Luffy has ever had at the end of any major arc in the story. Not only do none of the citizens of Wano see what he did, literally none of them are aware that a battle was even happening, none of them are even aware that there was any danger to be saved from in the first place, and in fact, here is the craziest thing. Many of Wano's citizens literally don't even know that Kaido and Orochi were bad in the first place. Many of them still think Kaido is great. And as for the quietness and secretiveness of the victory, you might say that, well, maybe it's symbolic that Kaido was defeated without anyone ever knowing that Luffy was fighting for them, as a reflection of how Oden was silently fighting to protect Wano for years. But that wouldn't explain why Oda would have Kaido's actual defeat have no witnesses, as that is in no way dramatic, as we already actually have a clear comparable example of a quote-unquote secret battle with a secret victory, which was Alabasta. That was very explicitly a secret battle fought and won by the Straw Hats, with no one ever even knowing that Luffy was the hero who defeated Crocodile. But at the end of the day, the actual defeat of Crocodile was still dramatic. Crocodile was still launched out into the open for everyone to witness the defeat, so that the defeat still had a large-scale dramatic impact on the people, even if none of them knew that Luffy had been fighting for them. No matter how you want to spin the potential symbolism of what just happened, that doesn't change the fact that dramatically you would still always expect the moment of defeat for the tyrant to be a spectacle witnessed by all those that are being liberated, as Oda has masterfully done throughout the story so far. Not to mention, even setting aside the people of Wano, it is usually just as powerful and satisfying to see the Straw Hats and other allies witness Luffy's victory. For every major arc, that moment of them witnessing the man that they've put all their faith in actually pulling off the impossible victory, that cathartic moment is an absolute staple of every major Luffy victory for a reason. That adds to the power of the victory just as much as the citizens seeing his victory. But again, with Kaido, it was notably devoid of any onlookers. And even just the scene direction of how the villain is defeated. When Luffy lands the final blow on a major villain, it is usually an epic, visually captivating spread that carries an indisputable sense of climax. Compare King Kong Gun against Doflamingo to what just happened with Kaido. This is the exact same scenario. Exact same type of finisher, big punch sending villain to the ground, literally exactly the same, but one of these attacks is drawn with far, far greater finality and force than the other. I'd say the most obvious reason Oda would depict Kaido's defeat in a less visually spectacular and honestly quieter manner like this is because in Dressrosa the punch really was the finisher, whereas in Wano this punch is a red herring and therefore deliberately drawn to be less visually impactful. As after all, in Oda's own words from before this entire conflict began, he outright stated that it would be obviously disappointing if Kaido were defeated by a big punch, meaning that whatever route Oda is heading towards for Kaido's true defeat, this is literally the least likely option. And in fact, it's supposedly the option that Oda crossed off the board from the beginning. And continuing to add to the strangeness of the scenario is that right now the Fire Festival party is already going on. We all expect the final battle of every major arc to be followed by a celebration. Well, there's literally already the biggest party in Wano going on right now in the Fire Festival, and while most naturally expected Onigashima to end up coming above the Flower Capital, basically crashing the party, and the battle having to conclude in full view of the citizens, instead, everything seems to have wrapped up. The citizens, again, have no idea that anything bad was going to happen to them, and they are literally still throwing a party. Meaning that from here on, the Alliance is going to, walk over to the Flower Capital, tell everyone that Kaido is going to do something bad. Actually, first, explain to the people that don't know yet that Kaido was, in fact, bad, as again, many people literally do not know that, and many people believe Kaido is great. And then after explaining that part, then they explain that they beat Kaido and the Beast Pirates and that everyone is free, and then they all just kind of continue with the party. That is, to me, a somewhat bizarre ending to this conflict. And finally, here are particularly suspicious things that are big, glaring red flags. First of all, the flame clouds went out, and Momonosuke had to save Onigashima, as expected. But the big question is, what was the reason Oda chose for the flame clouds going out? For a long time, it was built up that the flame clouds would go out when Kaido is defeated. And that moment will be when Momonosuke will have to hold up Onigashima. When Kaido is defeated. That is what we were warned of. Very similar to Doflamingo's birdcage. If Doflamingo is defeated, that is when the birdcage will disappear. That is what was established. And that is particularly dramatic after all. The moment Kaido is defeated, his clouds would disappear, much like Doflamingo's birdcage disappeared the moment that he was defeated. But while Doflamingo's cage did disappear because he was defeated, why did Kaido's flame clouds end up disappearing? Well, Oda found a different reason entirely to put out Kaido's flame clouds, Raizo's water. Oda had no reason to do this. As far as we could tell, the water basically put out all the fire inside Onigashima and solved that problem, but I don't think anyone was expecting that it would all spill outside and then accidentally put out Kaido's flame clouds. So why did Oda choose to do this? If this really is Kaido's defeat, why not have Kaido lose control over the flame clouds, have them disappear as Luffy overpowers him, symbolizing his defeat, the same way Doflamingo's birdcage disappeared. The entire scene would play out pretty much exactly the same way. Kaido would be losing the clash, the flame clouds disappear, Momonosuke moves Onigashima, as Luffy sends Kaido plummeting to the ground. Why did Oda go out of his way to find some other excuse for the flame clouds to go out if Kaido is really being defeated here? Could it be because Kaido isn't actually being defeated by this punch? Again, if you remember with Doflamingo, there was a clear moment after Leo Bazooka where it was made to seem like Doflamingo might be defeated, but Luffy quickly pointed out that no, Doflamingo was not yet done as the birdcage was still up. That was proof that Doflamingo was not yet defeated. Now in Wano, if Oda is trying to trick the reader into thinking Kaido is finished off from this blow, well, the problem is the reader would still know that something was wrong if the flame clouds were still there. The same way the reader knows Doflamingo is not defeated so long as the birdcage is up. That's why instead, Oda had to find an alternative excuse for the flame clouds going out, which was Raizo's water. This way, it leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not Kaido is actually defeated, as the clearest indicator as to whether Kaido is completely knocked out or not would be if he can maintain his flame clouds. And Oda suspiciously circumvented showing the reader whether that was the case or not. Similarly, CP0 leaving as he sees Kaido about to lose. We know that it was stated that if Kaido and Big Mom were defeated, then the world government would move to take over Wano country. If CP0 is leaving now, we can assume that it means that the world government / marine forces are about to be attacking Wano, which would make very little sense if this is meant to be the cathartic, freeing conclusion to liberating the people of Wano and a happily ever after. But it would make a lot of sense if Kaido and potentially the Beast Pirates are about to have a second wind, if the tables are about to turn, and the Alliance is about to be in desperate need of a major third-party distraction to get away. And finally, Kaido's flashback. Even though we got a bit of Kaido's flashback, Oda was very selective in what he showed and gave us extremely minimal insight into Kaido's motivations. We did get some clarification as to why Kaido craves a world of war and violence, but Oda also seems to have deliberately held off on all of Kaido's deeper, more pressing motivations that were repeatedly hinted at throughout the arc. The real meat of Kaido's flashback that Oda was building to has yet to be delved into, such as why Kaido is in Wano, why he specifically chose to enslave the people of Wano, and why Kaido stopped believing that he himself could be Joy Boy. So with all that being said, I believe in the next 2 chapters we will get some indication that Kaido is not yet done, be that the continuation of his flashback or something else. And let me know if you think he's done or not in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe, and you can support me on Patreon to get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics, link in the description below.